Hi guys, I'm Kim Cash, and I just baked these 4 little cakes. I don't know if you can see them really well. I've got them sitting here in front of me. And then with the leftover batter, I made some cupcakes, but there's only 3 of them left this morning because I baked them yesterday. And it's the 4th of July weekend, so happy holiday weekend. And I'm just gonna make a cake because tonight we're having our family together, my daughter and her wife and my sons and one of my son's girlfriends, and we're gonna have dinner and probably margaritas, cake, and then we're gonna have a paint night. We all like to sit around and paint, and so we're gonna do that. So I wanted to make a dessert, a special dessert. So I've got my 4 little cakes, and I'm just gonna show you some of the tools that I use to make a cake. I have my Silpat here, which is just a silicone baking sheet, and I use it for all kinds of things. And then I have my little turntable, which is it's just a super inexpensive little spinning table, kind of like a Lazy Susan, so I can put my cake on it and spin it around to decorate it. And then I have my buttercream frosting here that I made. And one of the things that I never seem to make enough of is buttercream frosting, and I wanted to tell you guys the recipe, and I'll try to put it in the description box below, but a lot of times I forget to add that, so I'm just going to tell you. I use 2 cubes of butter, and then I put 4 cups of confectioner sugar, which is just powdered sugar. I don't know why they call it confectioner sugar. And then I put 4 tablespoons of milk, and I'm not really great about measuring the milk. I just kind of splash it in there. And then I use this food coloring. Let me grab it and show you, because I wanted to have a red, white, and blue cake. So I use this to make it really white. Let's see if you can see that. It's just a white food coloring, and it is, I got it, it's Wilton's white food coloring. And then for the tools that I use, I just keep a big cup, and I keep them right on hand. And one of my favorite tools is this little teeny spatula, and I love this so much that I have 2 of them. I also have another one right here, because when things get dirty, I just like to pull it out, and you can see how much smaller it is than my regular little spatula. And then I have some other favorite things that I thought I'd share with you. Let me come around and grab them. This is just a pie server, but I use it a lot for smoothing my cakes. And then I have an offset spatula, which is just for going around the tops and things. And I always have on hand a couple rubber spatulas. And then already I have my Wilton's reusable plastic bag with the tip on it. And so I have everything ready for me to frost my cake. And then the first thing I do is I make a crumb coat on my cake. And a crumb coat is just the first layer of frosting. You have to do a couple if you don't want the crumbs to show through. So there's my recipe I wrote down. So I pull over my, before I even do that, you have to make sure they're all level. And because there's always overage on the top on my cakes, you can put around the edge, you could put there are these, I have baking strips that you dip in water and you put them around so that they aren't supposed to create the overage. And it does work pretty well, but you still have to level it, so I don't use them as much as I probably could. Anyway, the next step is to I have this. I get these things at craft stores. It's a Wilton's, they call it a cake leveler, which makes sense. And it's just a simple little saw. You could use a knife. If you're good at, paying attention and you have a really good eye for detail on how level it is, then you could just use a knife. But I like mine to be super the same, because if they're not consistent, you're going to have a cake that kind of leans a little bit. And of course you can always fix that with putting dowels or something in it, but the easiest thing is just to start with a really level cake. So I just have, I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a wire there which works like a saw, and I just take it across the top. And when I cut off the top, I always save the leftover because I can make cake pops out of it, and my family loves cake pops. So I take the top off and put it on a plate, and I just save that. And to make the cake pops, all you do is mix it with your leftover frosting and then kind of chill it and put them on a stick. It's not difficult at all. So by using this leveler, all my cakes should be the same size. And you can see some have a huge leftover top. And you know, I grew up in a family with 9 kids, so I don't like to waste anything. We didn't have a lot of food around, so we used everything. And I still like to do that today. So I chilled these cakes before I cut them so that they wouldn't crumble. If they're too hot, they will start to crumble, and that can create its own problems. So make sure you chill your cake for like at least a half an hour. You can put it in the freezer for like 10 or 15 minutes, just so that it's not going to crumble, and you'll be able to tell as soon as you start cutting it if it's chilled enough. So see, I've got a tower of cake right there that I can use for cake pops. And then I'm just going to bring and I always flip the last level over to make a nice flat top. Now typically what I would do is put some frosting in between them, or some pudding or jam or whatever it is you like to put on your layers. Sometimes I use whipped cream and fruit, but right now I'm just gonna get my crumb coat on them. So I will go all the way around. And this is one of the tricks, is just to take a little dab of your frosting and put it on your turntable, and then use the bottom down and push it down, and then that frosting is like a glue, food glue. Now that I have a nice thick layer of the frosting on, I just want to smooth it so I can see if the edges look, straight up and down. And so I use my pie cutter, which there's all kinds of tools you could use for it, but it just seems to always be about the right size for me. And so I just like this tool. So if you have tools around the house, that work, you don't have to go out and buy something special. And I like this better than a lot of the tools I've bought. So you can also fill in any spots. One of the things people do a lot of times is they cut off the outer layer of the cake so that there's not a thicker, how it gets a little more baked, a little more firm than the rest of the cake. And so they cut off that outer layer, but I actually like that part. So I leave it on, but you don't have to. And so what I'm going to do is what I want to do is make a red, white, and blue cake. And so one of the things I want to do is make sure I have a really thick layer on so I can scrape some away. I want to do a striped cake. I like making striped cakes. I think they're just fun. So Okay, so now that I've got a nice thick layer on the sides, I want to kind of just pull the top layer to the center, which kind of flattens the edge around it. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect yet, but I like it to be pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to go put it in the fridge and let it chill for at least a half hour, and then I'll come back. So I just went down and got the cake out of the freezer, and I'm going to put on my second layer. You can see why I need a lot of frosting. And so when you're layering a couple layers, you got to have a lot of it. So that's why the recipe I gave you was a double batch. If you just make one batch, it's usually like 1 cube of butter and a cup of confectioner's sugar. I just always call it powdered sugar. And then a little bit of milk, splash of milk. And I added also vanilla and my white food coloring. So, and the nice thing about chilling this is that it goes on so much easier. When your cake, if you have a cake that's warm, if you haven't chilled it, you're going to get a lot of crumbs. And you don't want to do that. But sometimes you're in a hurry, you know, what are you going to do? I've always made cakes for my kids' birthdays. And that's why it's really nice if you make your cakes ahead of time and put them in the fridge or the freezer. And if you wrap them in saran wrap and then, you know, make it airtight, they will stay in the fridge and stay good for weeks. And actually, if you put it in the freezer, it'll last like up to a year. So that's the nice thing about making your cakes ahead of time. If you have a big family, like I have a really big family, then it's nice to have cakes just in the freezer that you can pull out and defrost. I once had my brothers and sisters stop by after they'd gone to something, and they all stopped by, and I had literally 30 people at my door. And my dad, at that time, he looked at me and said, "Well, don't you have anything to serve?" I'm like, "No, Dad, I don't have food for 30 people sitting in my fridge." And that taught me to start having some things in the freezer that I could pull out. And it's, of course, never happened again. It was because I have one brother. My mom had 9 kids, and one of my brothers had 8 kids. And so if he was in town, you know, and everybody came over, you could have an insane amount of people just all of a sudden. And the thing is, I bought my house from my parents, so we have a big old Victorian that kind of always has felt like home because we were raised in this house. And so people like to come here because it makes them think of Mom. In fact, just the other day, I had somebody stop by. They were driving by, and they said, "Does Tony live here?" That was my mom's nickname. And my husband said, "No, but her daughter does." And he said, "Pull over a minute, we'll talk to you." Because we were out gardening. And it was a kid that grew up next door to me. And I hadn't seen him in, oh gosh, like 50 years. 50. And it was really fun. Because, you know, you always wonder, oh, what happened to so-and-so? Or, you know, I wonder what so-and-so's doing now. And, but I literally had not seen him in at least 50 years. So that was really fun. That was Guy. His name's Guy. And his parents, you know, they'd lived next door to us for, years. But they moved when he was 6. So I knew his sister better. She was the older one. But, you know, actually Guy hung out with my younger sister and Julie hung out with my older brother. So, typically. But when you grow up in the same house, it's, you know, people will stop by. Okay, so now I have this comb that I'm going to go around and scrape off some of the frosting. And you can buy these at any cake store or bakery store probably. I don't know if you can get it just at a regular grocery store. You probably can't. But you want to try to get a nice even layer. And that's the nice thing about the turntable. And then I got to clean it off and do it again. So you could have a bowl of water to dip your tools in, and then you want to line it back up really well. And don't press too hard. That's one of my big glitches, as I press too hard and take away too much of the frosting. We all have our little areas that, you know, are weaknesses. You'll see it as I flip it around. The top part I scrape too much. But you can always just fill it back in with frosting. You know, that's one of the good things about cake. You make a mistake, you just add a little more frosting. So I'm going to put it back in the freezer. You can see the ridges, which is where the other color is going to go. I think you can see that. And then I'll be back. So now that I'm waiting for the cake to chill again, I'm going to make my cake pops, or at least the dough for it. So I just break up the cake, the leftover from the tops of the cake, and just crumble it. And then I'm going to just add in the frosting. And then I'll chill that and make my pops out of that. I've got my little sticks sitting here. And I'm just using my hands. You can use a fork if you don't like to touch the cake and crumble it up. But I don't mind, so. It reminds me of playing with Play-Doh as a kid. And then I just take whatever leftover frosting I have here. Because the stripes that I'm going to make those out of blue frosting, and I've already got that set aside. And you just make the frosting the same way, but add a different food coloring. The thing is, with certain colors, like red, you have to add a lot of food coloring, so to make it a real red and not a pink. So you do want to make sure that you have enough frosting and you keep it thick enough for colors that are maybe more difficult. And I think that red is one that's more difficult. Even if you have the gel colors, to get a real true red, it takes a lot of color. And that's moistness that you're adding to your batter, your dough, your frosting, not your dough, your frosting. Well, if you're going to make cake pops that are red, it is going into the kind of the dough. And I just try to make it really, turn it into like a ball. You want to coat your crumbs really well with the frosting so that every bite is consistent. And that's why I like to get my hands in it, because then I can feel it. You know, as you get older, your eyesight isn't what it used to be, and so I can tell just from the feel of it how it should be. And sometimes you miss a little spot, you know, just by looking at it. So this is the way I like to get really consistent. And you see, I don't know if you can see that. I'm just mixing it around. And when it starts to form, where you can make it into like a ball, like this, then you know that you've got the right consistency for your cake pops. And then I'm just going to chill it, and I'll form my little balls and put my little sticks in it and chill it again, and then you dip it in chocolate. And I just use baker's chocolate. I'll show you. I just melt the chocolate and have my batter really chilled so that when you put it in, it's going to set really quickly. So that's how I want it, kind of like this. I know it doesn't look very pretty right now, but these cake pops taste so good. It's like one of my family's favorite things. So there I go. I'm going to put it in the fridge and let it chill, and I'll come back. So I'm going to do some red and some blue. So here we go. So now I've got 3 bits of, let me see if you can see that, fondant right here that I've rolled out just to make them thin enough to stick onto the cake. I'll bring the cake back up in a minute, but I just wanted to make some stars. I'm just using a cookie cutter. I'm just trying to find the right spot on the fondant. Just press it down. And you could put, people say use cornstarch underneath fondant so that it doesn't stick to where you're cutting it out. But you could also use powdered sugar. And I just think cornstarch sounds like an odd thing to use, there's my tools, to use on a sugary product. And I know you can because I've used it, but I just kind of prefer to keep it all in the same flavor palette. So if you use powdered sugar, it has the same kind of consistency, but it's not going to allow the fondant to stick. But if you just use a Silpat, it works fine. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. Let's see. I guess I got to bring it back towards me. So I'm cutting out red, white, and blue stars to go on the side of the cake. And you could use a bamboo skewer, or you could use, if you had a small star, you could use a toothpick. Cocktail stick is what they call them. But these are shish kebab, bamboo shish kebab sticks. And I use those a lot for whenever I'm making a craft or cake or, baking good or any kind of craft. They just seem to work really well for a lot of purposes. And I could just put the stars on the stick and refrigerate them to chill on them, and those would work too. But now I've got my my red star. Let's see if you can see that. My red star. My blue star. and my white star. And I'm going to go put those in the fridge and bring back my cake. Refrigerator. And now what I'm going to do is just pipe some frosting on the top. And then I'm going to put some, I'm going to move it onto a cake stand, and then I'm going to decorate it with some peppermints and some Red Hots. So let me get that ready. Now I've got some lollipop sticks with the wrappers, and I'm just going to take the sticks, dip them into the chocolate, and then it acts as the glue, and stick them in to my little cake pops. Going to put a little dab of frosting underneath these doilies that I have from a cake stand. I have a really pretty cake stand that is a bohemian glass. Let me show you. It is. It's got roses on it, but I don't think that really is a good fit for 4th of July. So I'm just going to put a little bit of frosting around the edges to hold down the doily. And first I have a black one that'll sit on it. Smush it down. You always have to glue everything. And then another little dab for the white one. And then this is the tricky part. You got to take your cake off of your turntable and get it onto your cake stand. And this can be where you have issues. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. Okay, so now I've got my cake on my cake stand. I'm going to use a little bit of frosting down around the edge, the border. And what I'm going to do is use my little peppermints there. And the frosting is just the glue, of course. It's just my glue. Red Hots in the middle. So I made these stars to go into the cake, and I made these stars out of fondant and put them on my bamboo skewers. And I could stick them in, but I think I'm going to trim the bottoms a little bit. But before I do that, I do have these extra ones that I can put on the cake. And I think I'll just stick them on. So I've got red, white, and I'm going to do a blue one. And then I think I'll do a multicolored one. I've got this one. Let's see if you can see that. I'm going to put that right here. And I think I have room for one more. So I'm going to put that one right here. Let's see if I can maybe make it. Okay. And then I want to trim these. Okay, there you have it, my 4th of July cake. Let's see if I can twirl it around so you can see it. So there you have it, my 4th of July striped holiday cake. I hope you guys have a great 4th of July weekend and a wonderful long holiday weekend. And if you have any questions about how I made any of these things, put it down in the description below, in the comments below, and I'll answer it best I can. And I'll try to put the recipe again for the buttercream frosting because I think it turned out pretty nice. It worked pretty well. And the fondant is just what I used for the stars, which you could have, you could use gum paste to make them harder. But I'm going to go put this in the fridge, and I just want to say thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and you can click the notification bell for to be notified of the next thing that I make or post. So thank you guys. Happy 4th of July. Bye.